using astrology for when to start a business. In this video, you're going to learn everything about the do's and don'ts, about what to look for, what not to look for, what's important and what's not, astrologically speaking, when you're launching a business. So let's do this. All right. One of the most important areas of business astrology has always, since time immemorial, been the foundation of businesses or of ventures, of entrepreneurial endeavors. This is an important field of study and an important understanding that we want to add to our repertoire so that we can make sure that our endeavors and our ventures are aligned with cosmic forces. They're aligned with the cosmic flow. All right, so this being said, there is a whole tradition of electional astrology, which deals with looking at the timestamps, so to speak, of a particular endeavor, because an endeavor also, like a person, has a particular date of birth and a time of birth, basically, which is the signature that you can read in the astrology and which defines this endeavor. But more importantly than looking at electional astrology for me personally has been at least the practical experience. And where did I get that practical experience? I have been working with hundreds of different types of entrepreneurs and ventures and startups, from lifestyle entrepreneurs to media creators to startups in tech who were on the forefront of AI and crypto, Web3, and virtual reality, you name it, I've worked with them. I led an incubator for a few years in Toronto, a creative tech incubator where we worked with lots and lots of different startups. And after that too, I have had my fair share of involvement in entrepreneurial ventures. And throughout all this time, I've been crafting and honing and testing the art of looking at charts and understanding astrological cycles, how they relate to the successful development of a venture. So I'm going to share with you the things I learned and what works and what doesn't work. But before we get there, we have to first ask the question, what even counts as a business launch? So what exact moment is it that we want to create a chart for? Obviously, we work with charts in astrology, but what is that moment that we want to chart? And there is a couple of different candidates for this. So we have the most important one probably is obviously the incorporation date. When do you incorporate your company, right? But that's not the only thing. We also have a sort of more of an ideal date, which is the date or time of the conception of the idea or the conception of the name. When you first came up with the name or the idea, you could cast a chart for that moment as well, right? Then we have a third option could be when the company was first traded. Now, if this is a large company, and you have an IPO, or if it's in the crypto space and you have an ICO, or you have a Genesis block that is minted for the first time, then those would all count as incidents of a first trading or of a being kind of in the market actively. Right? So that's an important date as well, if that exists. And fourth, last but not least, is the launch of the website. And this could be a date that's important, especially if you're having a e-commerce business, or if your business is simply, if you're running that through an Instagram page or a TikTok page, then the date and time when you launch that Instagram or that TikTok or that e-commerce website, that will be your inception date. You can make a chart for that time. All right, now we know what we're looking for. We know what counts potentially as an inception date for a business. And now, well, what do we do next? We could now simply apply to astrology and look at those charts for those inception points and try to optimize for them. Get the best charts possible so that we have better chances for good outcomes for the venture. And this certainly has been or is what some or a lot of electional astrologers do. Now, I am not fully behind this, and I think this is not necessarily the best thing to do, just to look at having a good chart. I will tell you why in the video. Stay tuned. in the next parts, you will understand exactly why I'm saying this and what you should actually do to optimize your chances. But before, I want to tell you what it means. Let's just look at what it actually means when we say we want to have a good chart, at least in classical electional astrology. Let's look at, for instance, let's look at the chart for right now. All right, so this is the chart for right now, March 24. And if you were looking at this like an electional, classical, traditional electional astrologer, then, and you want to find a good date for the launch of a business, what would you do? Well, you would look ahead and you would try to get good constellations and you would try to get strongly placed planets, right? So for instance, well, we have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that's happening right now that we're in the midst of. Obviously, this is huge for any type of technology ventures, especially if they are in anything to do with Taurian-related themes, fintech, economy, regenerative, anything around material, circulation, energy, and so on. And if they're in that field, you would say, amazing, you're in a wave, you can kind of ride that wave of innovation that's coming up when you incorporate around the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and you can be your business will carry the imprint of being a pioneer of this wave. And that's certainly true. But what else would they look at? They would look at also, you want to have strongly placed planets. So for instance, if we look here, we have Sun in Aries, and if we go a little bit further ahead, but yeah, for instance here in April, beginning of April, Sun is in Aries, but Mars is with Saturn here, and Venus is in exile in Aries. Is not very strong here, so you would say, okay, let's avoid that. And also Mercury is retrograde, so unless you want to, the electional astrologer would probably tell you to avoid this because the Mercury is pretty weak here, and Mercury handling communications and any type of exchange activities that your business has. You don't want to have a weak Mercury, which is burnt by the sun and in retrograde here. So you'd say, okay, look, let's go ahead further. Let's go, let's see. And then you go, and then you see, okay, in May, we still have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, but in addition, we now have as well, we have Venus now in Taurus, which is very strong. Venus is in domicile in Taurus, is super strong there, super happy and strong. And Mars is now also in Aries, so it's in its own home, is the ruler of Aries. So you would say, okay, this is a very good chart, right? And well, Mercury is just coming out of retrograde here. So you would say this is a good chart. And then probably you would also look for a good moon phase. Maybe you would want to have a moon being in waxing, or not being in the waning phase, because it's something new that you're building and you want this to grow. So you would say, okay, maybe like this, when moon is here, right? And we still have the rulership of those planets that I mentioned before. And now additionally, we have the moon in a nice configuration here too. So you would probably say something like this. Look at May 12th, right? And you would say, okay, you have a lot of strong planets here, and you have a strong moon. Moon is also now in his own home with Cancer, and you would recommend this. Now, is that what I recommend? Nah, it's not. You can already tell this is not what I recommend doing. Now, why? Because when you're doing this, there's two mistakes here in this approach. The first one is that it makes no sense to try and get only great aspects for your chart when you're incorporating a business, right? I can show you hundreds of examples of extremely successful businesses, vast grown enterprises, which have Mercury retrograde, which have the moon in a waxing phase, in a waning phase, or even in the end phase, in the last part of the sun-moon cycle, which have, planets in exile, which have hard constellations, all of that, right? It doesn't mean that if you have hard aspects or difficult aspects that the business is going to be a failure. On the contrary, it could be that you need those challenges, right? It's almost like you're trying to escape from certain challenges by getting yourself a better chart. but maybe you need those challenges. And by escaping those challenges, you're actually sabotaging yourself, right? Think about it, it's like a person. It doesn't mean that if a person is born with hard aspects or difficult aspects that they can't be successful, right? Maybe, God wants them to have these hard challenges. Like maybe they need these hard challenges, right? So they need to incarnate with those hard aspects. And just like that, maybe your business needs to incorporate with those hard aspects. So it's not, you shouldn't just try to evade hard aspects and just trying to find that date where you have just only easy and smooth aspects. That's number one. But now, number two, and this is far more important. More important than what actually the chart, how strong the chart actually is in terms of planets being in rulership and planets being in domicile and so on. More important is, what are the aspects that the business chart makes with your personal chart, with you, the founder, you, the entrepreneur, because this is your business. And if the business, let's say you found an election where the business has this beautiful, great chart, but it doesn't relate well to you, it doesn't connect to you, it's not going to be a success. Your venture, if you're the CEO, if you're the founder, if you're the entrepreneur who's leading this, or if you have a couple of co-founders, then you have to look for all of them, right? Your venture, it should be aligned with you primarily. I'm going to tell you what I mean with a couple of concrete examples. See, so when you look at successful ventures, and this I have seen always again confirmed every time, just working with startups, working with entrepreneurs, myself, launching different projects and ventures, every time seeing this confirmed, that it's far more important what the synastry, the synergy basically between your chart and the chart of the venture is. And I'm going to show you some examples that you'll know. I'm going to show you some famous examples. For instance, look at Mark Zuckerberg when he founded Facebook. You got to think about it. When you're founding, the founding date of a business is basically transits to your own personal chart, right? So whatever is the founding date of the business also at the same time is transits to your chart, right? So, and you need to have powerful transits and empowering transits at that time so that this can be long-term successful. For instance, look at this. So when Mark Zuckerberg founds Facebook, right, when he puts the Facebook online, he had, at that exact time, he had Jupiter just transiting his ascendant, greatly expanding his sphere of influence, greatly expanding his ability to be active and have a mark on the world. And at the same time, he had the North Node transiting his Venus, right, which is stands for, fortunate events. And this is basically, and it's out of the eighth house of foreign investment, of the money of other people, right? And this is basically the triggers, and then the Venus here too on his descendant. So it's basically his chart is getting triggered for a fortunate outcome of this endeavor, which is far more important than just looking at the chart itself, basically just like, as if you were to assess it on its own or in isolation, right? Obviously, you can look at the chart itself and you can see a lot here. The chart also of the venture should carry the signature of what you're creating. So he's creating Facebook here, and he's got the sun. You see, he's got the sun, Neptune in Aquarius in 11, right? So this is kind of the ultimate kind of network for dreams and fantasies and living out, right? The Neptunian, kind of the fantastic, or adding like the virtual layer to your existence, right? And this is in 11. So the chart itself needs to obviously make sense in terms of what you're creating, the business that you're creating, right? If you're creating a So this is what I was saying before. If you're creating anything that is doing innovation around the themes of Taurus, right, around energy and materials and all that, then yeah, then it's great. Or fintech or economics, anything like that. Yeah, it's great if you can if you have the opportunity to create a venture here in May 2024 sometime, right, when you have this super strong constellation here in Taurus with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. But obviously, this needs to, two things. It needs to, so number one, it needs to have strong aspects to your personal chart. And number two, it needs to actually represent the business that you're creating. It needs to be representative of the business that you're building, right? So it's just to show you a couple of other examples still to, so you see this is again and again repeated. And I could look at the, Mark Zuckerberg, and then when he goes to the IPO, when Facebook does the IPO, actually, Jupiter comes one time around, and it is exactly on his sun. You see, so see it goes one time around, comes on his sun exactly, right, on the minute, and that's when he has the IPO of Facebook. And similar theme when you look at Elon Musk and SpaceX. So you had here. Exactly as well, same Jupiter on his sun exactly. So he had this transit right now, a transit that brings a lot of popularity and a lot of recognition, right? And also again a strong 8th house here, and the strong 8th house, which is the money of other people. If you want to work with the money of other people, right, you want a strong 8th house. If you want your 10th house to be aspected to make strides in moves forward in your career through this business that you're creating, and also in your public standing, then you want the 10th house to be aspected, right? The 6th house and the 2nd house are other zones that are of importance, right? The 6th house and the 2nd house for work and community and for resources, for your own resources, right? So this is what you want to look at. You want to look at the charts aspecting your chart positively and in meaningful ways, and you want to look at the charts of the business making sense in their own right? They need to make sense for themselves. So Apple here, right? Apple, if you look at Apple with the Jupiter Moon conjunction in 10, right? And this is a Jupiter-Uranus opposition, right? And this is super important for Steve Jobs, who is also a Jupiter-Uranus native, right? And with the Jupiter-Uranus opposition with Moon in there, right? You've got the kind of revolution, a technological revolution, which Jupiter Moon gets this broad popular appeal, huge broad popular appeal. This is the marker, right? Technological revolution with broad popular appeal, right? And then how does it relate to Steve Jobs' chart? When you look at this, Steve Jobs and Apple, and you see here, how does it relate? Well, Steve Jobs' moon is on the sun, and the sun in the business chart is the leader of the company or the CEO of the company. And Steve Jobs' moon is there. It means when you have moon-sun conjunction, it means it's kind of a merger of soul and mind and soul, right? So Steve Jobs basically merges he merges with that role of being the leader of Apple, right? He becomes that with his whole essence, with his whole being, right? So this is a chart that in this sense is powerful for him. And then he's got this Jupiter moon that I was just talking about, which is the broad popular appeal, is on Steve Jobs' Mars, right? Here, you see this here. So he gets active to that. He fires it up. He fires it up and he gets active around that. And one more example I'm going to show you here. So if you look at Jessica Alba, the actress, she founded this company, The Honest Company. She became insanely successful, right? And became $1 billion company. And she founded it pretty early on in her career. And you see, The Honest Company, it was incorporated exactly with this Jupiter-Mercury conjunction, and it's on her MC, exactly on her MC. Interestingly, by the way, this is exactly the place where now the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is going to take place in April, May 2022, 2024. So this is just a side note, but you can expect the honest company to do pretty well in these coming months right now. So really well, right? And you can see them doing some big creative moves and some big innovations that they're going to champion. But importantly, again, this goes to show how important it is that the chart of the company is aligned with your chart, the founder. To just recapitulate this, what's important? What do you have to look at? Number one, what you should look at is that the foundation of the business, it has positive and meaningful aspects to your own chart, to your chart as the entrepreneur. And number two, the chart should make sense for the business that you're creating, right? So it should tell the story of your business in a good way, right? If certain aspects are generally strong in the chart, but they don't fit the narrative and the symbolic energies that you need in your business, then it's no good. It's not going to go anywhere, even if you have supposedly a great chart for that business. All right, so all of this is on my side learned through experience and through lots of applications and experimentation, and there's still many levels and layers to this. It goes much deeper. You can still look at so much more. You can look at solar return charts for the company. You can look at the Davison chart, which is basically the combination of your chart with the company or of the co-founders, for instance, in a startup with the company. You can compare all of that, and you can get so many layers of insight which allow you to navigate things better. If you want to get deeper into any of this, you can work with me, therealdrv.com, and just go and for now sign up to my newsletter, which is going to be below this, the link, so you can be in the loop and see the latest updates on entrepreneurial astrology that I'm going to be teaching. If you want to know other insights and other questions around entrepreneurial astrology, around marketing campaigns or business partnerships or sales and negotiations, I would love to hear from you in the comments so I can do my next videos on this. And lastly, if you have yourself some stories to share about your own experience with looking at charts for business foundations, I'd love to hear them. Please put them in the comments and we can get into a convo that way. With that, I'm going to leave you with this. I hope this was helpful, and I see you at the next one.